Welcome. My name is Alan Cohen, and this is the Quarantine Interviews. Today, we're lucky to have with us, he has a little extra spare time during this time, a professional, well-seasoned session bass player, mainly from New York City he was, producer and engineer. His name is Jeff Ganz, and he played on numerous records and tours all around the world. So I'm really excited to speak with you. Hi, Jeff.
Well, how you doing, Alan? It's wonderful. Thank you so much for asking me to be with you on this.
It's my pleasure. Just remembering some things we met many years ago, about I don't know, maybe a good 30 years or something like that.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Right, and we played together. I remember you from the city, and you were kicking. Your energy was always such high energy on the bass, and you held it so solid down, but your energy was always so positive and so much fun. So everybody that really worked with you was, you helped make not only the music, but the energy of whatever session you did was, at top level.
Oh, that's awfully sweet of you to say. Thanks. And I love your work as well. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to play more and more and more.
And more.
I love what you do.
Well, you could send tracks over now, because I don't know how we're going to be playing more and more with this going on. But Jeff, why don't you just give a little bit about yourself, how you started out, a little bit about your career, and some of the really the top names of the industry that you performed with, and that, just so everybody knows a little about you.
Well, I have worked with a lot of different kinds of people and a lot of different types of music. And if I was to pick four diametric points in my career, it would be Jerry Mulligan, Johnny Winter, Rita Moreno, and the Village People. And in between. Yep.
What outfit did you wear with the Village People?
And every time someone would ask me that, I would tell them I was either the plumber or the systems analyst. And they did ask.
What else would you ask about the Village People?
Exactly.
And your career with Johnny Winter, just playing with Johnny. I mean, all of them are legends, but Johnny just blows me away. And sorry we lost him so young, but
Yeah, but he went out with his boots on. He was in Austria. He came off the stage, and a few hours later, he was gone. But that Johnny Winter thing actually came through. I saw that you interviewed my pal Ray Marchica the other day.
Yeah, of course.
Pal Ray Marchica. And the way the Johnny Winter thing happened was that Ray and I were working with Roy Buchanan together.
Roy, another killer, legendary guitar player.
Exactly. And then when it came time for Johnny to make a change in his band, when John Paris left, the way I heard it was, well, what should we do? His manager said to him, and Johnny said, well, get that guy that played with Roy Buchanan. So it wasn't like a big cattle call or anything like that. It just kind of ended up being there, and that was it, you know?
So Roy Buchanan and Johnny, his legend. I remember all those rock and roll hoochie coo. I remember sitting in the Fillmore East up in the top balcony when he did the live album with the scarf on and playing Johnny Be Good and all that stuff.
Well, here's some interesting trivia about that night. You know the famous Allman Brothers album live at Fillmore East?
Sure, I was there.
They were an opening act for Johnny Winter and a lot of people didn't know that. I think you were at that show, though, right?
I was at that show up in the balcony.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite shows of all time.
Oh, no kidding. How could it not be?
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So where did you go to school? How did you get into the music business? And
Well, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and my family was from New York. My dad was working with the Labor Department for a long time, and then we moved to D.C. From DC to New York in 1966 when my dad took a job with New York City. And here's an interesting little note. My best friend in Washington, DC in first and second grade, Mike Stern.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
And we actually ran into each other at LaGuardia about a year and a half ago and had a magnificent reunion.
Well, at the airport. At
LaGuardia. He was there with Laney coming from Chicago, and I had just come in from somewhere on my touring gig. I'm working with a band called the Hitmen right now.
Hitmen, wow. So you'll have to tell us about the Hitmen too.
Oh, I absolutely will. Be happy to. So anyway, I was, when we moved to New York, about 12 or 13, I got a guitar for my bar mitzvah. And I started teaching myself like everybody else did. And I became like a pretty respectable Hendrix Clapton kind of guy, on guitar, correct. and, you know, playing in bands and things like that. Nothing session-wise, nothing reading-wise, nothing like that. But I was pretty good at playing Wait Until Tomorrow and other things from Axis Bold as Love and all the Clapton things, and was, you know, in bands. And then what happened was I went to my cousin's wedding and sat in with them with the Club Date band on guitar. And then they said, you know, that kid is pretty good. Let's start using him. So I started becoming the rock and roll guitar player for these wedding bands. And apparently at the time, bass was a compulsory double. So the paradigm was that you would play bass on the regular quote unquote music and pick up the guitar and do your Proud Mary and Evil Ways, you know, and your Get Back for the rock segment.
Did you sing at the time?
Yeah, I was a singer at the time, and well, and still am. I love to sing. And so what happened was I started studying guitar to legitimize myself, thinking I wanted to, you know, maybe I should become like a real guitar player, a session guy, a jazz guitar player. And my first guitar teacher was Ira Newborn, who used to, well known as a session guitarist and as a film composer. I mean, his record speaks for itself. And he handed me his bass. And at that moment, I said, you know what? I'm playing the wrong instrument, and got head over heels into bass from when I was 20 on, and pretty much gave the guitar up in a few years. Just knew I wasn't going to be like yourself.
The bass was more integral to the bottom end, holding the band together. I mean, you know,
well, without a doubt. And also, I'm a drummer by soul, and I'm a studied drummer. I mean, I studied with Tony Tedesco and Ben Graham and Don Junta and all of these great drummers. And also the lessons were standing next to the best drummers in the world. I mean, you know, every time I would do a gig with Mark Chica or Bernard Purdy or Michael Keller or these kind of people, it would be like a lesson in and of itself, you know? So I decided to study and get some technique, and studying drums has certainly made my bass playing more honest.
Right, because you're locking both sides together. You're thinking on both sides. So you actually started playing drums back then as well?
Well, before we, you know, I sat down on my our neighbor's kit and could play a beat way before I could play a chord on the guitar. You know, so that was probably around age 10, 11. And it just kind of resonated with me. And that's one of the reasons I went for the drumming thing so much, as I didn't want to be a drum athlete. I wanted to play what Hal Blaine played on records. I wanted to play what Don Brewer played on records. You know what I mean? I was always, and I'd say even to this day, I'm a song guy rather than a chops guy.
But your chops are also high level, but I didn't realize.
I appreciate that, but it's all about serving a song to me, even if it is oleo. Even if the song is Autumn Leaves, you still have to remember when you're soloing that there's a melody, and it's got to be at least thought of while you're soloing.
That's
you know,
really.
So that's what's keeping me going.
Where did you study music in college?
I went to a few different places. I went to Queens College for a while, and then I went to a program at Kingsborough for a while, which was an individualized baccalaureate that 802 offered at the time. Mm-hmm. And the teacher there was Larry Charles, if you remember. He was a great saxophone player. Yeah. And at the time, I was offered the gig at Radio City Music Hall in the orchestra to replace Marty Balk on the Fender bass chair. And I went to Larry Charles and I said to him, Jesus, I mean, I'm in this school thing here. What should I do? And Larry said to me, are you kidding? Take the gig. So then basically, as far as, you know, education, I'm lucky to have had some of the best bass teachers around. Bill Pemberton, you know, was my longtime teacher. I studied with Jeff Andrews a little bit. May he rest in peace. I studied with a few other folks, and also just studying, listening, and learning. The Catskills was an amazing education for me because that's where I learned how to read well enough that at a certain point I could start subbing on shows, Broadway shows, and then getting called for Broadway shows and being in Broadway shows, you know, in original shows like Big River, where I was in the original cast of that, Starlight Express with Ray, and of course a few very famous failures like Marilyn.
Yeah, right. So you did have somewhat of a Broadway career as well.
Big time, because I always, when my mother would take me to shows at the National Theater in DC to like see The Music Man, I just was like, yeah, I want to do that. You know, so I was not just a jazz musician or a rock musician. I mean, that was something that really, really appealed to me. my father took me to see Annie Get Your Gun at the Carter Barron Amphitheater. And I said, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Wow, terrific. That's great. So from there, then you started playing with more well-known acts. Like you mentioned, Johnny went to Jerry Mulligan and Rita Moreno. I mean, that it's such a large spectrum from Johnny and heavy to blues to Rita Moreno. And, you know, what were some of your highlights in that?
I just like a lot of different stuff. I really, really do. I mean, I'm all over the place in terms of what I listen to. But my more momentous gigs, subbing and dancing on Broadway, and after a particularly difficult piece, getting a hand from the orchestra. That was large. That was immense for me, because even though it was not like playing in the Garden for 65 nights in a row, selling out, this was a personal triumph for me. I used to love playing at Cats. I used to love playing with Ben Vereen the first time I played him. I used to go, did you ever work for Boris Molina up at the Concord? Did you go up and do a lot of those things?
No, I didn't do a lot of them.
Because there were a lot of people that did. As a matter of fact, I talked to Kenny Sobel earlier today.
I know Kenny.
And he did a lot of that. Steve Tarshis did a lot of that, you know, the New York guys. So I would go up there and work with like the Anthony Newleys and the Perry Comos and the Clint Holmeses. And actually, that's how I ended up getting the position with Rita, because when I was playing her as an augment up at the Concourse, she says, we're thinking about adding a bass player. How'd you like to do it? So it all snowballs, you know, the New York way. That's how it all seems to work.
To the other,
you know?
Was having a great reputation, playing well. Everybody likes you still, but playing well. But everybody has to be comfortable enough to recommend you from one gig to another, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's always, you know, you can say whatever you want, but it's luck. It turns out to be luck, because in New York, there's so many great people. 20 people would be the right gig for the you know, be the right person for the gig, you know, but it's just a matter of luck, chemistry with the people that are hiring you, them feeling that you're going to make their job easier, all kinds of things like that.
And the conductor, of course, has to be that comfortable that you got his back at all times.
Right, and willing to delegate that responsibility, and instead of micromanaging the rhythm section, trusting them that they could come up with something better than the ink.
Right. Wow.
You know, and add to the show. In other words, it depends. I mean, if you have your ear to the stage and you have your ear to the conductor, you're going to do the right thing.
I like that expression. Trusting the rhythm section.
Yeah,
there's nothing worse than when a conductor tries to, you know, bend and shape, you know, a pattern. Because once you lock down a beat, you got to hold it straight ahead, and they have to trust that, you know, the rest of the, you know, the cast and stuff also has to trust the rhythm section that's holding that whole locomotive going right through.
Right, and that was all before the advent of click tracks. And, you know, things keeping people lined. I mean, the reason for click tracks were often pre-recorded vocals, which has been going on in television for many, many years, because people can't necessarily belt, you know, 8 times a week, you know, of a demanding show. And I mean, you know, listen, you were handpicked for Sugar Babies and every other show you did. It wasn't like get a guitar player, it was get Al, you know?
It's true. Actually, I was doing a chorus line at the time with Marchika, and then doing it on Broadway. And then in the audience, I don't know, somebody came backstage and says, there's a guy named Glenn Roven wants to meet you. I had no idea who Glenn was. He was one of the youngest conductors on Broadway, Leonard Bernstein's protege. And he says, I want you. Lou Volpe, who you know, Lou Volpe, all-time phenomenal guitar player, was leaving Sugar Babies. You mentioned that. And I need a guitar player, and you're the guy.
And speaking of the Sugar Babies thing, I used to sub a lot for Julie Ruggiero.
Oh, yeah, Julie. Yeah, where is Julie? I haven't heard from Julie in a long time.
Not sure.
Sure. Great bass player, too. All right, so we don't have a lot of time, and that's fantastic stuff about you. Where are you at right now, and in performing live and recording? Because then I want to talk about, you know, how this pandemic is really affecting you, the music industry, and your career at this moment.
Well, a year ago, my family, meaning my wife, my stepdaughter, her husband, and the 3 babies. We now live in St. Augustine, Florida.
Yeah.
And because of my gig with the Hitmen, you know, which I was telling you about,
Yeah,
we can live anywhere and do it.
who are the Hitmen, so everybody knows?
The Hitmen it's Lee Shapiro's brainchild. And what it is it was originally started with Lee and Jerry Polchi, who was they were in the Four Seasons together, and Don Ciccone and Jimmy Ryan. So the whole premise of the Hitmen is it's the guys that toured and recorded with the bands. So when Jerry Polchi was in the band, he was the singer on Oh What a Night. So of course, Oh What a Night is what we play. You know, Steve Murphy, our new drummer that did the Happy Together tour for many years and a million other things, worked with everybody from Chuck Negron to Jack Bruce. Jimmy Ryan, the guitar player, was with the Critters, and then 21 years with Carly Simon. So of course he plays his solo on You're So Vain every night. So that's the premise of the thing, and we do stuff that I was associated with. My big feature in the show right now is the Mungo Jerry Classic in the summertime, and yes, I did play with Mungo Jerry as well. So that's the whole thing, and people seem to really, really like this band.
Yeah,
you know, but right now, obviously, because of this new normal, we're off the road. We had a really promising year, but because of the situation, we're all kind of home right now. But the technology, to go right to where you're going, the technology is permitting things like this now. So as much as this is horrific for everybody, we're sort of all in the same boat. And those who have taken the initiative to do online concerts, and there's a lot of online work. Fortunately, I'm able to work as an engineer and a producer with people all over the place that are stuck at home with the same issue because the technology permits it.
So do some of these people send you the tracks or the stems and then you'll add stuff to that at your home studio?
Yes, yes, and yes. And I'm collaborating with people all over the place. I'm working with a lady here who's doing an audio book. So I'm working on that. And I'm doing a lot of co-writing and co-licensing and co-production with Denny LaRue, who's an old friend of mine in New York who lives in Atlantic Beach. And I just did a track for Larry Edoff the other day, who's up in Connecticut with a singer he's producing. So anybody that wants to do it is doing it, you know, and everybody's very, very proactive. I'm certainly not the only one involved in this kind of work right now.
Yeah, of course. But then obviously your playing out has pretty much come to a halt.
Well, I had a steady, fun little Monday thing. Rick Levy from the Box Tops and I and a drummer named Tom Santoni were doing this 5 to 8 gig down in St. Augustine Beach, and I succeeded a founding member of that band that passed away. And it's a real rock'em sock'em, no rehearse, everything from the British invasion to rockabilly to Stones to all kinds of stuff. And an extra added fun for me is that I get to play the 8-string bass on this gig. It's 8-string bass, acoustic guitar, and a stripped down drum set.
Low, higher one, and what else? Right.
Sorry?
I mean, what are you adding? A low what? C? What?
No, 8-string bass meaning, well, shall I show you real fast?
A 4-string bass, like a 12-string guitar.
Correct.
Hey, I got the same chair in blue.
There you go. The Staples chairs. Well, here it is. And I mean,
there it is, somewhere in my blue.
there it be. And this is what I played with Roy Buchanan, actually, because it was a guitar trio. So I had brought that along, and Roy really took to it. So I mean, what it's basically used for is, you know, playing counter melodies. I mean, when we do Rock Away Renee, I play the bridge, you know, because it just kind of jumps out with the upper octave. And it's a lot of fun, and I'm doing a lot of singing on that gig, and the gig is very well attended. And down here, normally, age is not an issue because a lot of the audience is older than we are.
Right, that's right.
And of course, because of Rick, we do the Box Tops classics. You know, he's the letter guy, and I'm the cry like a baby guy.
Oh yeah, cry like a baby, sure.
Yeah.
Was that the electric sitar on that one?
Yes, and I've actually worked with Gary Talley,
the
guitar player. So in Hitmen language, yes, I've played with the Box Tops too. So the Hitmen thing is one of us has to have played with or recorded with a member of the band. So we do foreigner stuff because the singer in our band plus the guitar player and the drummer have all worked with Ian McDonald from Foreigner. You know what I mean? So that's how that seems to work.
So obviously,
Go ahead.
let's get back to the main premise of this conversation is how it's affecting the music industry. Now, you did mention, of course, these type of meetings are happening a lot more. So playing wise, probably you stop playing for a while live, obviously.
Yes, but a lot of people are teaching now, and a lot of people are podcasting now. And I've been involved in some podcasts over the years, but a lot of people are sort of taking the bull by their horns because they can.
Because they can.
Just a lot of virtual stuff going on. Some people are
Also
doing concerts in their backyard in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Greg Smith is, if you're familiar with him, he did Moving Out on Broadway, and he's been with Ted Nugent. So he has a band, and they do like by request, power trio music from his backyard in Pennsylvania. It's great.
I like that. The backyard sessions.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sessions. Well, hopefully this all turns around and God willing, we're all safe.
And that's the main thing, because, as long as people heed what they're being told, not that anybody knows exactly when it's going to pass, but it'll pass probably better if people are just more mindful of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's some interesting stuff that you're going through over there too. So,
and you guys in Jersey and New York,
well,
I feel
a lot of our friends in New York are really in ground zero over there,
Well, exactly, because I used to live in Elmhurst. I had an apartment there, and Elmhurst Hospital, which is in the news all the time, was a 3-minute walk from where I used to live. But what really drives it home for me is that some very close friend's daughter that I've known since she's a little girl is an ER doc there. Okay. So they're really in the midst of it up there.
Yeah. There's a lot of people doing that. I talked to Rob Wallace yesterday. Rob, of course.
Great drummer, great guy.
Yeah, and his two sons, one's a nurse, one's a doctor, something like that, and they're on the front line, and they were offered time off, and they said, no, we're just staying on the front line. We're needed.
Yep. Yes.
So I think as a community in around the whole country, around the world, it really does have to come together to of course listen to the heat of staying home, and it's hard. It's a mental thing too. I mean, you're playing a lot, but in the back of your mind, I'm sure it doesn't leave your mind, where we are. So you could be in the studio.
How could it?
Yeah.
Everybody's very cognizant about what's going on. It's just that some people are choosing to deal with it in different ways.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for younger people too. Our kids. You mentioned you have a few kids over there. Not kids. I'm sure they're.
Well, no, my stepdaughter's 31. My stepson's 28. He's still in Jersey.
Kids, but
But I got granddaughters. I've got two 18-month identical twin girls and a 5-year-old girl.
Identical twin girls.
Oh yeah.
All right. So why don't you, to wrap this up? Why don't you give us a final something about a little inspiration and to wrap it up for other musicians, other people watching, and what do you got to say for that?
Keep plying your craft, whatever it is. Talk to people that are going to make you feel better than not talking to them. Stay in touch and be as communal as possible, because there is an end. Nobody knows exactly when it is, but this is going to be okay at some point, I think.
Great.
Do you agree?
I have to agree. I just hope they don't turn off the internet so I can't talk to other people. So
yeah, and that's another thing. If this happened 30 years ago, it would have a much different story and much more of a claustrophobic problem.
Right. So, but anything can happen. So I'm trying to be optimistic like you are in thinking that this is what it is. And it's
right.
Not that next level of it being a little bit more intense.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a jazz musician and you asked me to button it up, I'd say, yeah, just play the blues in C.
In C.
Yeah.
That's right.
Keep it simple.
It's really great to talk to you, Jeff Ganz.
Great to talk to you. And Al, thanks so much for having me here and asking me to do this with you.
My pleasure. It's really a pleasure to speak to you, Jeff. And, all the best to you and your family, and be safe. And, the world's a better place with you too.
Oh, I appreciate that. And stay safe and all the best to your family. And just looking forward to seeing you in person sooner than later.
Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Jeff
Thank
Ganz.
you.
Thank you very much.